Okay, let's talk about interval notation. Okay, it's just a shorthand to represent a solution. So I'll start off with just a simple graph. Suppose that I know I want to talk about the numbers x is greater than 8. So this says all the numbers bigger than 8. So if I look on a number line, here's 8. I would do an open circle because it's not an equal to, and all the numbers bigger than 8 go to the right. So here's a picture of x is greater than 8. So if I ask you for the interval notation, I want you to tell me what did you shade on that number line from the smallest comma to the largest. Now the symbols that you use on interval notation, you either use parentheses or you use brackets. If you're using a parentheses, it was an open circle. If you're using a bracket, it was a closed circle. So the bracket means that you actually get that number, you include that number. Parentheses says that it's an open circle. We don't include the 8 because we want everything bigger than 8. So like 8.1, 8.2, 9, 9.5, and so on, a million, all those numbers. Now, because we have to shade the arrow right here, that means these don't stop and we're going off in the positive direction, so it's going out to positive infinity. So we use the parentheses for open circles, but we also use the parentheses for infinities. So if we're going off to the positive direction, that would be positive infinity. If we're in the negative direction, that would be negative infinity. Okay? Now we'll use parentheses around infinities because there's no such number. So for this one, if I ask you for the interval notation, I'm asking you what did you shade? Well, you started off at 8, but you didn't include 8, so you have to use a parentheses. And then you went off in the positive direction forever and ever and ever, so you went off to positive infinity, and you have to use the parentheses. Okay, because we don't include an infinity. Infinity is not a number. We cannot use a bracket around an infinity. So let's look at another one. Suppose that I had x is less than or equal to 7. So I would look at the graph of that. Here's 7, here's 8, 6, here's 0, over here's -1. So my shading would be a solid circle on the 7 because it is an equal to. And then I want all the numbers smaller than 7 or equal to 7. So these are going to go to the left. Okay. So notice that I shade the arrow because I'm not stopping. I'm going on to negative forever and ever and ever. So now when I write my interval notation, I want the smallest thing I had shaded to the largest. So the smallest thing I had shaded, well, it's negative infinity because this arrow is going to keep going on. And then I come over to the right and I stop at 7. So the largest thing I have shaded is 7. I'll use a bracket on the 7 because it's solid. That means I can include the 7. And I'll use a parentheses on the -8. So that is interval notation for x is less than or equal to 7. Okay, so let's try a compound. Suppose that I worked it out. You know, you work your left side, you work your right side, and you work it all out, and you end up with x is greater than 4 or x is less than -2. So this one's an or. Or means we union or we unite the two pieces together. So I would look at my number line. Here's -2, here's 0, 4 about right there. So I want everything bigger than 4. That would go this way. This is x is greater than 4. Okay. And then everything smaller than -2, that would go that way. That's x is smaller than -2. And since this one's an or a union, then my answers can be here or here. So I have to include both pieces on my solution. Okay, so this time I've got 2 separate pieces right here. So I have to write the interval notation for this piece, and that would be from -infinity to -2. And then I have to write the interval notation for this piece, and it goes from 4 out to +infinity. Notice that I use parentheses because they're open circles, and then I would unite those 2 pieces together. So here is the answer, the interval notation for x is greater than 4 or x is less than -2. Okay, so this is a compound inequality with or. Let's look at a compound inequality with and. So let's look at x is greater than 2 and x is less than or equal to 5. Okay, so let's look at that on the number line. Now our ands, we're not uniting the 2 pieces, we're looking for the place where they overlap. So we're looking for where is the shading on both. Okay, so here's 2, here's 0, let's say 5's about right there, here's -1, 10's over here. Okay, so I want x is greater than 2, so this is a picture of x is greater than 2. And then I want x is less than or equal to 5, so I'll have to have a solid dot for the equal to. And then I want all of those less than, so here is x is less than or equal to 5. And so now my answer has to be in both. So the only place that has both is the place that these are shaded right there. And so my final answer is from 2 to 5 and in between. So remember, your interval notation goes from the smallest thing you have shaded to the largest. So my interval notation starts at 2, my shading starts at 2 and stops at 5. Now my 5 has a solid circle, and so that's a bracket. And my 2 has an open circle, so that's a parentheses. So here is your interval notation for a compound inequality, and this one was an and.